My name is Pauline Haynes. I'm 35 years old, and I've never been someone who makes scenes. I don't slam doors, don't raise my voice, don't weaponize silence to punish people. If something feels off, I usually just step back, quietly. I leave group chats instead of arguing in them. I excuse myself early instead of demanding explanations. For most of my life, I believed that made me mature, low maintenance, easy to love. I grew up in a family that was anything but quiet. Loud holidays, overlapping conversations, inside jokes I never quite learned how to interrupt. My mother had 3 siblings, 2 sisters, and a brother, and they all stayed within an hour of each other in the same small Connecticut town where nothing ever really changed. Everyone knew everyone. Everyone stayed put. Except me. I moved to Boston in my 20s for work. It felt like breathing fresh air for the first time. I built a career, learned how to live on my own terms, and eventually met my boyfriend, Daniel Carter. Calm, thoughtful, the kind of man who noticed things before pointing them out. Last year, we bought a small fixer-upper just outside the city. Peeling paint, uneven floors charm, we convinced ourselves we could restore. Between work renovations and pretending we'd start eating better after the holidays, life felt full, busy, hours. But Thanksgiving was always non-negotiable. No matter how hectic things got, I showed up. Even when Daniel's family invited us. Even when deadlines piled up. My family treated presents like currency. If you showed up, you mattered. So I did, every year, for over a decade. This year, something felt off. The family group chat, usually alive with recipe debates, and my Aunt Linda's painfully unfunny memes went silent. Days passed, then weeks. Daniel noticed before I admitted it to myself. "Are you sure they know we're coming?" he asked one night, scrolling through his phone. "They always do," I said automatically. Still the doubt lingered. I texted my cousin Abigail, the unofficial organizer of everything, bringing wine again. Anything else. 2 hours later. All good. Looking forward to seeing you guys. So we packed up early Thursday morning, wrapped a bottle of Cabernet in a dish towel, made the familiar 2-hour drive with gas station coffee and old playlists. I even wore the ugly sweater my mom bought me last Christmas. I thought it might make her laugh. When we pulled into the gravel driveway, my stomach tightened. No cars, no voices, no warm glow through the windows. I told myself we were early. Daniel stayed in the car while I walked up to the porch and rang the bell. Once. Twice. The door finally opened, and my Aunt Marie stood there blinking like she'd woken from a nap. "Oh," she said. Not warmly, just surprised. "We thought you were still out of town." My hands tightened around the wine bottle. I texted Abby. Marie smiled the kind of smile people use to avoid responsibility. "Thanksgiving's at my place this year. We thought you knew." The house behind her was dark, empty. "Well," she said gently, already closing the door. "Maybe next year." "Happy Thanksgiving, Pauline." The door shut. I stood there for a second too long, then walked back to the car. Daniel looked at me, searching my face. "Everything okay?" I didn't answer. I just started the engine. That was the moment I realized something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. The drive back felt longer than it should have. The same highway, the same exits, the same gray November sky pressing down on the windshield. But something inside me had gone quiet in a way I didn't recognize. Not calm, not acceptance. More like numbness settling in to protect something raw underneath. Daniel didn't push. He never does. He reached over once, resting his hand on my knee, a quiet anchor, and let the silence exist. I was grateful for that. If he'd asked the wrong question, I might have broken apart in the car, and I wasn't ready to give that moment to the side of the road. When we got home, I didn't unpack. I didn't change out of the sweater. I sat on the couch and stared at the dark TV screen like it might offer answers if I waited long enough. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I was embarrassed. Embarrassed that I'd shown up with wine and optimism, like a child who didn't realize the party had ended. Embarrassed that no one had thought to check, to ask, to knock on my digital door the way I'd knocked on theirs. Daniel ordered takeout. I didn't eat. The food sat untouched on the coffee table while my mind replayed the porch, the look on Aunt Marie's face, the way the door closed without hesitation. Not slammed, just finished. Later that night, while Daniel showered, my phone buzzed. The family group chat. A photo appeared. Everyone around a long table. Glasses raised, smiling wide. Even my younger brother Lucas, who had told me he was working Thanksgiving this year. The caption was simple, grateful for family. My chest tightened. No one asked where I was. No. Are you on your way? No. Did you get stuck in traffic? Nothing. I had vanished without causing so much as a ripple. That was when the thought crept in, unwelcome but undeniable. This wasn't a mistake. It was an omission. Quiet, convenient. I opened my laptop not with a plan yet, just instinct, muscle memory. I'd always been the tech one, the fixer, the organizer. If someone forgot a password, lost a file, couldn't get their streaming app to work, they called me. Scrolling through my password manager felt like flipping through a family album. Only this one was made of subscriptions and shared logins instead of faces. Mom still used my Disney Plus. Uncle Greg streamed sports through my ESPN account. Abigail used the grocery discount card I'd set up years ago. Aunt Linda played my Spotify playlist during yoga. I'd given access freely, happily. It made me feel connected, useful. Like even from a distance, I still belonged. I started changing passwords. Not angrily, methodically, one by one. Netflix, Spotify, Prime. I logged out devices, quietly imagining the confusion that would bloom later. The texts, the mild panic, the assumption that I'd fix it like always. Daniel came back into the living room, towel around his shoulders. You okay? I think so, I said, though the words felt untested. The next morning, a message from Abigail popped up. Sorry, I thought you weren't coming this year. Aunt Marie said you were busy. I stared at it for a long time, long enough to notice the absence of the words I'd been waiting for. I'm sorry, we messed up, we hurt you. Instead, there was deflection, shrugged responsibility, a tidy explanation that asked nothing of her and everything of me. While I was still reading, another message landed in the group chat. A second photo, same table, same smiles, different angle. That was it. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, not explosively, but enough to let resolve seep in. I typed a single message. Hope the wine was good this year. Oh, wait, you never opened the door. I hit send. Then I muted the chat. I wasn't done, not even close. But for the first time, I stopped asking myself what I'd done wrong and started asking what I was willing to tolerate. I didn't expect the message to land like it did. 10 minutes after I sent it, my phone lit up again. First from Abigail. Wait, what happened? Then my mother. Pauline, what's going on? Are you okay? A minute later, Uncle Greg chimed in. Is this about yesterday? There's been a misunderstanding. That word misunderstanding hit harder than the door ever had. A misunderstanding implied confusion. Two people missing each other in the dark. It suggested no one was at fault, no harm intended. But I had been standing on that porch in full daylight holding a bottle of wine, looking someone I loved in the eyes, when they told me they thought I was still out of town and closed the door anyway. Daniel glanced over from the kitchen where he was making coffee. You okay? I turned the screen toward him. He read silently, his jaw tightening. They're not sorry, he said finally. They're just uncomfortable. He was right, so I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch, let it settle in places it had never been allowed before. By that afternoon, the first crack appeared. A text from Aunt Linda, hey. Netflix says my account isn't active. Did something happen? I stared at it, then set the phone face down. An hour later, Uncle Greg, ESPN Plus, logged me out. Can you resend the login? I didn't answer. The next day, my mother called. I watched the phone vibrate across the counter like a nervous animal, then go still. She left a voicemail, warm, practiced. Honey, we really need to talk. I know you're hurt, and I understand, but I think this can all be cleared up. Cleared up. That night, Daniel and I were putting up Christmas lights a little early. He said the house needed something cheerful. As he wrapped garland around the banister, I sat on the floor with my laptop and continued. Spotify access revoked. Amazon Prime removed. Instacart family plan canceled. When I logged into my cousin Zach's streaming profile and renamed it Figure It Out, I almost laughed. It wasn't petty, it was symbolic. Each login represented a small way I'd stayed tethered to a family that didn't seem to notice when I slipped away. Each shared account had been me saying, I'm still here, I still matter. Now I was taking that back. 2 days later, Daniel walked into the living room, holding his phone, his expression caught between confusion and amusement. Your cousin just sent me $8.99, he said. For what? He showed me the screen. The note read for Hulu. I smiled for the first time in days. Let him sit with that. The calls kept coming. Mom, Abigail, Aunt Marie. None of them left voicemails anymore. It was like they were hoping persistence would wear me down the way it always had before. Instead, the messages shifted tone. Hope everything's okay. We miss you. Don't let one weird holiday ruin everything. That last one lingered. One weird holiday. As if being erased could be reduced to a scheduling error. A glitch. Something small enough to brush off if I'd just be reasonable. I wasn't being unreasonable. I was finally paying attention. A week later, an email arrived from my mother. Subject line, trying to understand. It began with, "We love you so much," and ended with, "We never meant to exclude you." But in between were explanations, excuses, subtle redirections of blame. Thanksgiving got complicated. Someone must have told you. Maybe you could have checked in more directly. That line, the suggestion that it was my responsibility to confirm my own place in the family, did something to me. I closed the laptop and stood at the kitchen window staring out at the quiet yard. The lights on the railing glowed softly steady and indifferent. I knew then this wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries I should have drawn years ago. And I was done being convenient. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Not an email, not a text. A physical envelope with my mother's handwriting on the front, careful and rounded the way she wrote when she wanted to appear calm. Reasonable. Loving. I stood at the kitchen counter for a long moment before opening it, like my body already knew what my mind hadn't fully accepted yet. Inside wasn't a card. It was a neatly typed page. "Pauline, we understand you're upset, but please don't punish the entire family for one small mistake." I let out a short laugh, sharp and involuntary, the sound echoing in the quiet kitchen. The letter went on. "Your cousins are struggling without access to their learning apps and entertainment services. This has affected the children, not just the adults. Please be the bigger person." Be the bigger person. There it was, the phrase that had followed me my entire life. The invisible rule assigned to the quiet one. The responsible one. The one who never made waves. Be patient. Be forgiving. Be understanding. Be silent. I folded the letter slowly and set it down on the counter. Daniel watched me from the doorway. That bad. They're asking me to undo the consequences, I said. Not because they're sorry, because they're uncomfortable. That night after he went to bed, I opened the drawer beneath my desk. Inside were hard drives, thumb drives, old labeled folders, in my handwriting. Years of work, years of care, no one had asked for, but everyone benefited from. Family photos, scanned albums, old VHS tapes, digitized frame by frame, grandma's handwritten recipes preserved before the ink faded, birthdays cataloged, documents organized. I'd been the archivist without realizing that's what I was becoming. Because I'd always been the one who remembered. I sat there for a long time, fingers resting on the edge of the drawer, and made a decision not impulsive, not angry. Permanent. The next morning, I started with the family drive. Years ago, when my grandparents passed, I volunteered to digitize everything. Hundreds of photos, some curled at the edges, some with names written faintly on the back. I scanned them all, labeled folders by year, created backups, uploaded them to a shared cloud drive, and gave everyone access. At the time, they'd praised me. "Pauline, you're a lifesaver." Then they forgot about it. Forgot about me. I opened the access logs. 17 people still had permissions. Most hadn't opened a folder in months. A few had recently. Aunt Marie had downloaded 6 albums 2 weeks earlier. Abigail had favorited a recipe folder 3 days ago. I didn't delete anything. I made a clean copy, backed it up locally, encrypted it. Then I wiped the shared drive completely. Empty folders, broken links, access revoked. Then I sent a single message to the group chat. "Heads up, family drive under maintenance. Might take a while." No replies. Next was the family tree. 5 years ago, I'd built it from scratch, paid for the premium account, scanned birth certificates, marriage licenses, 8 generations mapped out. Everyone loved bragging about it when it suited them. So I changed the privacy settings. Private, password protected. I renamed the project Archived, no longer accepting contributions. Still no one noticed. But the thing they truly didn't realize I still controlled was money. After my grandmother passed, there was a modest account set aside for the grandchildren. A joint custodial account. They'd asked me to be one of the custodians because I was responsible. I never touched the funds. But I kept records, always. And the records told a story. Some grandchildren had benefited more than others. Multiple withdrawals, camp fees, tablets, trips, my share 0. I printed everything, highlighted discrepancies, created a spreadsheet that laid it all out clean and factual. Then I wrote a formal letter. This account is no longer being accessed equitably. I will be submitting documentation to the family lawyer for review and reallocation per Grandma's original wishes. I CC'd everyone. The group chat stayed silent. But the private messages came fast. "Why are you stirring things up now?" There's no need to involve lawyers. You're making this into something it doesn't need to be. Different words, same message. How dare you make this real? Daniel watched me read them, my phone face down on the table afterward. You okay? He asked. I nodded slowly. I'm better than okay, I said. I'm finally being seen. And for the first time in 2 weeks, the group chat lit up. They wanted to talk now. The first message came from Uncle Greg. Can we please schedule a call to clear the air? This feels like it's spiraling. Then Aunt Marie. I didn't mean to exclude you. I was told you weren't coming. Can we talk? Abigail followed minutes later. If this is about Thanksgiving, I really thought you knew. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen, letting the words sit. They looked right, polite, almost apologetic, but something essential was missing. None of them said, we hurt you. None of them said, we chose not to check. They wanted resolution without reckoning. I didn't respond. Not yet. Because there was still one thing left, one piece of truth they'd forgotten I had. The video archive. It was from my grandmother's last Christmas 2 years before she passed. No one had asked me to record it. I'd just gotten a new DSLR and wanted to test it out. She'd been tired that day, moving slower, but her eyes were sharp, her voice steady. She asked if she could say something for the grandkids. So I pressed record. I watched the video again alone in the living room, the glow of the laptop reflecting off the dark windows. She sat in her armchair, hands folded neatly, looking directly into the lens. She went through the names one by one. Abigail, spirited, outspoken, fearless. Zach, gentle, thoughtful, kind. The twins, clever, impatient, but full of potential. Then she paused. Pauline, she said, smiling softly. I felt my throat tighten the way it always did. You were the one who noticed what everyone else missed. You helped without being asked. You showed up even when it was inconvenient. I just hope one day they appreciate you like I do. Back then, those words had stung. I still believed appreciation would come eventually. That if I stayed patient, stayed quiet, stayed useful, they'd see me. Now the sting was gone. I trimmed the clip carefully. Just her words to me. Nothing else. No commentary. No context. Then I uploaded it to the family group chat. No caption. No explanation. Just the truth. After it sent, I exited the chat and logged out for good. I didn't wait to see reactions. I didn't need them. A few hours later, Daniel came into the living room holding his phone, his expression unreadable. Your cousin posted the video on Facebook, he said. Abigail, I asked. He nodded. She wrote, we should have listened to her sooner. I didn't check the comments. I didn't need to. The truth had moved out of the private space they'd controlled and into the open. The next morning, an email arrived from the family lawyer. Short, professional. The custodial account was frozen pending review. I'd be contacted for a full statement. The other parties would be notified. Later that afternoon, the mail slot clinked. A card. This one wasn't typed. It was handwritten. Pale blue with gold lettering that read simply, I'm sorry. Inside, my mother had written, I can't undo what happened, but I see it now, all of it. You deserve better. You always did. She signed it, Love, Mom. That night, Daniel and I sat on the back porch with mulled wine warming on the stove. The Christmas lights we'd hung weeks ago glowed softly against the dark. So he said gently, what happens now? I thought for a long time before answering. Nothing, I said finally. They can say their apologies. They can sort out their mess. But I'm not going back to how things were. He studied my face, so that's it. I'm not burning the bridge, I said, taking a sip of wine. But I'm not the one rebuilding it anymore. He smiled. About time. Later inside, I closed the last folder on my computer labeled Family. I didn't delete it, but I didn't back it up either. For once, I wasn't responsible for holding the past together. I was free to build something new out of choice, not obligation. The days after the video felt strangely quiet. Not the heavy, suffocating silence I'd lived with for years. The kind where you're unseen, but still expected to show up. This quiet was different. Spacious. Honest. The kind that lets you hear your own thoughts again. I didn't rejoin the group chat. I didn't respond to the lingering messages that filtered in through private texts and emails. Some were apologetic. Some were defensive. A few were careful in a way that suggested fear of saying the wrong thing rather than a desire to say the right one. I read them all. I just didn't answer. Because something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. The lawyer called midweek. Calm. Neutral. Explained the process. Asked me to walk through the records I'd kept. I did clearly factually without embellishment. I didn't need to argue. The numbers spoke for themselves. When we hung up, I expected to feel vindicated. Instead, I felt light. Like I'd finally put something down I'd been carrying for years, without realizing how heavy it was. That weekend, Daniel and I worked on the house. Real work, paint samples, new shelves, fixing the crooked cabinet door that had annoyed me since the day we moved in. The small grounding tasks of building a life that belonged to us. At one point, he paused, brush in hand. Do you regret it? I knew what he meant. No, I said without hesitation. I regret how long it took me to see that I was allowed to stop. A few days later, another letter arrived from my mother. Not an apology this time, not an explanation, just an update. She said she was in therapy, that she was learning things about herself she should have learned years ago, that she understood if I needed distance. She didn't ask me to come back. That mattered. I placed the letter in a drawer, not with the hard drives, not with the archives. Somewhere neutral, somewhere present. On a quiet Sunday morning, I opened my laptop one last time and clicked into the folder labeled Family. Photos stared back at me. Smiling faces, shared history, proof that what we had was real, even if it hadn't been healthy. I didn't delete it, but I didn't organize it either. I closed the folder and shut the laptop. Daniel was already outside, coffee in hand, waiting for me on the porch. When I joined him, he smiled and handed me a mug. To new traditions, he said. I clinked my cup against his. To chosen ones. For most of my life, I thought love meant endurance, showing up no matter what, staying quiet so others could stay comfortable. I know better now. Love is mutual. Presence is earned. And family, real family, doesn't forget you were standing at the door. This time when I walked away, it wasn't because I was avoiding conflict. It was because I was choosing myself.